So, before I introduce Libby Davis, let's talk about SPP and what SPP really is, the truth. SPP in 2005 in Waco, Texas was a photo op. That's all that was. That was, hey, look at us, we signed NAFTA Plus, woo! Do you guys like NAFTA Plus? I don't like NAFTA Plus. SPP, in 1999, the Fraser Institute, Herbert J. Grubel, and I hope I said that right. Look it up, people. It's a PDF. You can find it on the internet before they censor it. Came up with this report, 57-page document. It's called The Case for the Amero, the Building of a North American Monetary Union. That's not a conspiracy, that's their own words. That's what they called it. In 1999, PNAC, Partners for a New American Century, came up with this brilliant thing called Rebuilding America's Defenses. We need to put more money in America's military because Clinton cut down our funding. And that report was written by the same people who are now in the Bush administration. And they called for certain things such as 2 major theater wars at one time to show the world their supremacy as a group of nations and allied armored people, which is their major theater wars, Iraq, Afghanistan. They called for a new Pearl Harbor so that the American people would support the rebuilding of America's defenses, which then with that you have 911. Everybody knows about that, I hope. And what you also have is in 2002, Wendy Dobson and Robert Pastor, who's an American professor, but Wendy Dobson is the CD Howe CEO president at that time, and the Trilateral Commission, said their name out loud, came to Toronto, Ontario, and they had a group meeting. Well, the Trilateral Commission, they wrote this letter on what they were going to do with NAFTA and the way to progress and how to move it forward. And Wendy Dobson came up with the big idea, complete integration with the United States and Mexico, and an integration of customs, and an integration of the monetary union, and an integration of the natural resources, and an integration of your border guards and everything else. And Robert Pastor wrote about a North American country. Let's completely eliminate the borders. Let's completely just have a North American security perimeter. Let's have a North American tariff, North American police force, and everything else. And the Trilateral Commission endorsed, for the most part, most of the recommendations in Robert Pastor's report. Now that's really important because you fast forward to 2003, the following year, you have CCCE, which is the Canadian Council of Chief Executives, directed by Dr. Thomas D. Aquilini, I think his name is, no in relation to the owner of the Canucks, I hope. And he came together and they came up with a report called Security and Prosperity, the Canada and United States, the NASP initiative, North American Security Prosperity Initiative. And that initiative came up with 5 key points. The 5 key points in there were reinventing the borders to a North American border. It was security refineries so that the security was under one. It was in regulations of health and food, and it was also on regulations of water and natural resources. And the last kicker was the security aspect. And the security aspect was complete integration of Canada, United States military with Mexico into one. The following year, they came up with a new report called New Frontiers, Building a Canadian and United States Partnership in the 21st Century. Again, that can be found online at ccce.org. And that report is just more in depth of what the Security and Prosperity Partnership came up with. In 2005, in Waco, Texas, the 3 amigos got together and announced that they had this deal. The deal was the Security and Prosperity Partnership. Now, there was some questions in the media about, well, wait a minute. You guys are going to try and build a North American Union. That's the way it's going towards. And they said, no, 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 this is just NAFTA. This is just to better our trade. And you know, 9/11 when the border shut down, Canadian businesses were at loss for money and we couldn't get our goods down south, and we were worried about making profit. And so we need to find a way, you know, to get our goods across south to the border. And what happened was they came up with these reports. So 2005, they said, you know, it's only to streamline trade. It's only to get capital moving across the border in case there's another crisis. So within this deal, they said we're going to have working groups, but we're not going to tell you what they are. You know, we're going to have 300 initiatives that we're going to change. We're not going to tell you what they are. 2 months later, the Council of Foreign Relations came up with a report called Building a North American Community. And community in the Webster's Dictionary is an area of land or a group of people that's ruled under one government. Kind of, you know, that's not a union. But they came up with this report, and Robert Pastor, if you get a chance to go to the Council of Foreign Relations website, and you get a chance to look this up, this report, right in the beginning, if people sit here, well, what can we do about it? What can we actually do about it? Well, the point of the matter is this is what we have to do about it. Robert Pastor comes out and says, in 5 years, the American and United States relationship is just as integrated as it is. It took 50 years for Europe to do. So once NAFTA was signed, what took Europe to do in 50 years, it took North America 5. But the only difference is we don't have any parliamentary institutions. They all realize that the NAFTA judicial tribunals don't work. And the protectionist of the U.S. Congress is a big thorn in trade and capital's side. So within this deal, they said what we need to do is we need to set up a parliamentary advisory group. One along the lines of the Bilderbergers or the Wahlenberg, which is a security defense group of Europe. And this group will be put in power and will not be elected. And their position on this committee will last longer than elected officials so that they don't have to answer to the people, because the people's demands will bring them backwards. And it says right out there in the book, we need our rights. We need to have a say. We need a government that's open and accountable. One that will debate this in Parliament. One that will actually talk about this in Parliament. See, they don't talk about this. They want to talk about John Manley's book and his task force on Afghanistan. But they don't want to bring up that this April in New Orleans, there's going to be an SPP meeting. They don't want to talk about that. Let's keep that quiet. The media doesn't want to talk about that. Well, we have someone here who will talk about that. Someone here from the NDP who will be glad to talk about that. And will tell people what she thinks about that. And will represent the NDP. So with a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce you to Libby Davies.
We are talking about Canadian sovereignty. And I feel like we've been talking about that for years and years and years, going back to 1988, even before, in terms of this deep integration with the United States, both economically, politically, culturally, the use of our resources. But now we've seen this added layer of, one, the corporate elites who are they are in control of the process. So not only has it become an agenda that threatens Canadian sovereignty, and for us as Canadians to have the ability, whether it's in Parliament, whether it's through elections, whether it's through public policy, to determine our own policies and our own practices here in Canada, it's also become a process that is thoroughly, thoroughly anti-democratic. And as you know, all of this is taking place in secret. The corporate elites, through the North American Competitive Council, made up of 10 members from each of the 3 countries. They don't report to us. They don't, when I say us, I mean Parliament. They don't report to us as Canadians. And so this is part of the issue that we take on, and it's been moving and developing for years, but now the process is speeding up, and it's become something that threatens the very fabric of our society at every level. So I wanted to be here today to stand in solidarity with people who are here to speak out against the SPP, and to say that we demand that there be a debate and a vote in our Parliament on this issue. When somebody said over here, well, what do we do? Well, the first thing we do is we have to inform ourselves, we have to educate ourselves, and then, friends, we have to mobilize like hell. And we have to defeat Mr. Harper, who's escalating this agenda. But we also have to remember that it was Paul Martin and it was Mr. Manley in 2005 who began this process. In fact, it goes back to 2001 after 9/11, and that's where this agenda began, in terms of the secrecy and all of these little subgroups that are now having their little cozy arrangements to dictate what is fundamentally public policy in our country. So yes, our resources are threatened. the tar sands. There's a subgroup that wants to see a 5-fold increase in tar sands development, something that is completely contrary to the commitments that we make around climate change. That's something that's got to be stopped. Of course, it has a whole security level, and I want to say that we have to get across the message that security in North America does not come about through a no-fly list. Security does not come about by Canada's participation in the war in Afghanistan. Security does not come about by the war in Iraq. Security does not come about by harmonizing our borders and building this perimeter fence and somehow saying that we're isolated from the world and that we just become, you know, the shadow and the add-on to U.S. foreign policy, which is about dominating the world agenda in terms of economics. So we have to really speak out to people and let them know that human security comes about by the equalization and the use of our resources in terms of the North and the South. Human security comes about by making sure that we are providing adequate resources and not depleting third world countries and raping their resources and using cheap labor. These issues are linked in terms of what's happening globally and what's happening even in our own country. We have to make this an election issue because I believe passionately that Canadians do not want to see this kind of giveaway of our resources, of our political control, of our democratic rights, and Canadians do not believe that these massive security arrangements that are taking place and the harmonization of our policies where we become just an add-on to the United States, this is not something that Canadians want to see. And link these issues because they are linked in terms of what's happening with climate change, what's happening with the SPP, what's happening with poverty and homelessness. You know, I'm the Member of Parliament for Vancouver East, and when I see people sleeping on the streets in a country as wealthy as Canada, and we can't address that issue, but here we are about to give away our country, to give away our energy resources and build these pipelines and look at the possibility of bulk water exports. I say that is wrong, wrong, wrong. The no-fly list alone is a huge affront to democratic values in our country. That in and of itself we got to stop. The thousands of people who will be unfairly judged because of their name or because of some information that they're not even aware of. So these are big issues, but I want to say this, friends, sometimes, you know, the agenda seems pretty massive. And it seems like, how do we take this on? Like, where do we begin? But you know, we've done it before. On these trade deals through the WTO, remember the multilateral agreement on investment? And people said, you can't fight this. You know, it's taking on the corporations and it's taking on governments who are now working for those corporations. But you know what? We did it because of the mobilization that took place, not just here in Canada, but in North America and indeed globally. So this is something that we can take on and educate people and make it clear to our elected representatives. So if you want something concrete that you can do, I would ask you to contact your own Member of Parliament. If I'm your Member of Parliament, consider that you contacted me and I'm here. But if it's somebody else, get on them and find out what they're doing to speak out against the SPP and what they're doing to demand accountability in the Canadian Parliament so that we have hearings, minimum, that we have a debate and we have a vote. This is too important to leave to the corporate elites, and in fact we won't allow it to be left to the corporate elites. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Libby. Everybody make some noise.